What if I told you that the most powerful men in ancient Rome did not rule through armies or wealth? They ruled through something invisible, something you cannot see, cannot touch, but can feel the moment it enters a room. What if I told you that these men left behind 10 psychological tools so effective that anyone who masters them becomes nearly impossible to manipulate, nearly impossible to intimidate, and nearly impossible to defeat in any social situation? What if those tools were available to you right now, in the next 20 minutes? The Stoic philosophers were not just thinkers sitting in marble halls contemplating the stars. They were strategists. They were students of human nature so advanced that their insights about psychology, influence, and power remain more relevant today than anything published in the last century. Marcus Aurelius used these principles to govern an empire. Seneca used them to advise the most dangerous emperor in Roman history. Epictetus used them to transform from a slave into a teacher of kings. Today we are going to walk through 10 Stoic mind games that give you power over anyone. Not through manipulation, not through deception, but through an understanding of human nature so deep that you will never see people the same way again. Subscribe right now if you are ready for this. This is not casual content. This is a masterclass in Stoic psychology, and every single principle builds on the one before it. Mind game number 1. The power of emotional independence. Epictetus, a former slave who became the teacher of emperors, said this: "No man is free who is not master of himself." The single most powerful psychological advantage you can possess is this: not needing anything from the person in front of you. When you walk into an interaction needing approval, needing validation, needing a specific outcome, you are already operating from a position of weakness, and the other person can feel it. Not consciously perhaps, but on a deep, instinctive level. They sense that you need something from them, and that need gives them power. But the person who arrives complete, who engages fully but needs nothing, who is perfectly willing to walk away at any moment without losing a piece of themselves, that person holds every card in the deck. This is not arrogance. This is emotional self-sufficiency. The Stoics built their entire philosophy around this principle. Your peace, your identity, your sense of worth, these must be generated internally. The moment they depend on external sources, you become a puppet, and someone else holds the strings. Think about negotiations. The person who wins is almost always the person who is most willing to walk away. Not because they do not care, but because they do not need. And the absence of need is the presence of power. But emotional independence is just the foundation. What you do with that independence is where the real advantage begins. And the next mind game is so simple it will shock you. Mind game number 2. Strategic silence as a weapon. Seneca wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." The most wasted commodity in human interaction is words. People pour them out endlessly, nervously, compulsively. And with every unnecessary word, they hand away information, reveal vulnerability, and diminish the weight of everything they say. The Stoics knew that silence is not the absence of communication. It is the most potent form of it. When you are silent in a conversation, several things happen simultaneously. The other person becomes uncomfortable and begins to fill the void, often revealing more than they intended. Your eventual words carry exponentially more weight because they are rare, and you create an aura of depth that talkative people can never achieve. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire spanning 3 continents and wrote his most profound thoughts in a private journal that no one was meant to read. He did not broadcast his wisdom. He practiced it in silence. And that silence became the loudest legacy in philosophical history. The next time you are in a difficult conversation, try this. When the other person finishes speaking, wait. Do not respond immediately. Count to 3 in your mind. Watch what happens in that space. Watch how the dynamic shifts. Watch how the power rebalances. Silence is not passive. It is one of the most active tools you can deploy. Now, silence works beautifully when you control the pace. But what happens when someone comes at you directly? When they attack? When they provoke? When they try to drag you into their chaos? The next mind game was designed exactly for that moment. Mind game number 3, the mirror technique. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it." When someone attacks you verbally, criticizes you, or tries to provoke a reaction, the natural impulse is to defend, to counterattack, to match their energy. But the Stoics understood that matching energy is surrendering to it. Instead, mirror them, not their aggression, their words. When someone says something hostile, calmly repeat back what they said, not mockingly, genuinely, as if you were seeking clarification. This accomplishes something remarkable. It forces them to hear their own words from the outside. And often, those words sound very different when they come back. This technique also buys you time. Instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, you create a buffer, a space where you can observe your own emotional response without being controlled by it. Marcus Aurelius practiced a version of this in his meditations. He would examine the provocations he faced and restate them in neutral terms, stripping away the emotional charge, seeing them for what they truly were rather than what they felt like. When someone says you are a fool, instead of defending your intelligence, try saying, "You believe I am a fool." Watch what happens. The conversation changes entirely, because you have refused to play the game they expected, and a game with only one player always loses its power. If this is opening your eyes, drop a comment right now. Tell me which mind game you are going to use first. I read every single one. The first 3 mind games are about defense. Emotional independence, silence, and mirroring protect you. But the next one flips the script entirely. It is about using what most people consider a weakness as the most unexpected form of offense. Mind game number 4. Controlled vulnerability as strength. Seneca wrote openly about his own flaws when he said, "I am not a wise man, nor shall I ever be, and so do not require me to be equal to the best, but better than the worst." There is a counterintuitive principle that most people miss entirely. Vulnerability, deployed strategically, is one of the most powerful tools of influence. Not weakness, not oversharing, not emotional dumping, but the controlled, deliberate admission of a truth that most people would hide. When you admit a flaw before someone can use it against you, you disarm them completely. When you acknowledge a mistake before it is discovered, you take ownership of the narrative. When you show that you are human in a moment where others expect you to be defensive, you create connection that no performance could ever generate. The Stoics were not advocates of emotional suppression. They were advocates of emotional mastery. And mastery includes knowing when to reveal your humanity and when to hold your composure. Seneca himself wrote openly about his struggles with anger, with luxury, with the temptations that plagued him throughout his life. He did not hide these struggles. He used them. They became the foundation of teachings that helped millions of people across centuries. The key is control. You choose what to reveal. You choose when to reveal it. And you choose the purpose it serves. This is not confession. It is strategy. And when used wisely, it turns potential weapons against you into bridges that connect you to others on a level that surface-level performances never reach. We are halfway through now, and if you have been paying close attention, you have noticed something. Each mind game builds on the one before it. Emotional independence enables silence. Silence enables mirroring. Mirroring opens the door to controlled vulnerability. And the next mind game takes all of that and extends it across time in a way that makes you genuinely unstoppable. Mind game number 5. The long game of consistent character. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Most people think about influence in terms of single interactions. One conversation, one negotiation, one first impression. But the Stoics thought in terms of decades. Consistent character, sustained over time, is the most devastating mind game in existence. Because it is not a game at all. It is reality. And reality is the one thing that cannot be faked indefinitely. When you behave the same way in public as in private, when your principles do not change based on who is watching, when your word is so reliable that people stake their own reputations on it, you create something that no single brilliant conversation could ever build. You create a reputation that precedes you into every room. Not for a moment, not for an audience, but as a sustained practice that becomes indistinguishable from who you are. The person who is consistent is the person who is trusted. The person who is trusted is the person who is followed. The person who is followed is the person who holds genuine, durable power, not the kind that evaporates when circumstances change, the kind that compounds year after year until it becomes something that no competitor can match. Play the long game. It always wins. Now, what happens when someone tries to use your consistency against you? When they attack your approach, your style, your character? The next mind game turns their weapon into yours, and it is devastatingly elegant. Mind game number 6. Reframe their attack into your advantage. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This is perhaps the most elegant psychological technique the Stoics ever developed, and it is devastatingly effective. When someone attacks your position, criticizes your approach, or tries to undermine your credibility, do not defend. Reframe. Take the energy of their attack and redirect it to serve your purpose. If someone says you are too cautious, reframe it. Caution has saved more empires than recklessness ever built. If someone says you are too quiet, reframe it. I have found that the best listeners often make the best leaders. If someone says you lack experience, reframe it. Fresh perspective is what most experienced teams are missing. The Stoics did not see obstacles as opponents. They saw them as raw material. Every challenge, every criticism, every attack contains within it the seed of an advantage. Your job is not to fight the attack. Your job is to harvest it. Seneca was exiled for 8 years. He could have seen it as the end of his influence. Instead, he reframed it as an opportunity for the deepest philosophical work of his life. And from that exile came writings that shaped the next 2,000 years of human thought. The person who can reframe any attack into an advantage is the person who can never truly be defeated, because every weapon used against them becomes a weapon in their arsenal. Reframing is about transforming attacks in the moment, but there is a subtler skill that prevents you from needing to reframe at all. A discipline so simple that most people dismiss it, and that dismissal costs them everything. Mind game number 7. The discipline of delayed reaction. Aristotle said, "Anyone can become angry. That is easy, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy." Speed of reaction is almost always mistaken for intelligence. But the Stoics knew the opposite is true. The fastest reaction is usually the worst reaction. And the person who can delay their response, who can let time create space between stimulus and action, holds an enormous advantage. When someone provokes you and you respond instantly, you are operating from the most primitive part of your brain. Fight or flight, emotion over reason, impulse over intention, and in that state, you are at your weakest. But when you pause, when you let the provocation land without immediately reacting, when you give yourself the gift of even 5 seconds of deliberation, you shift from the reactive mind to the strategic mind. And in that shift, everything changes. The initial provocation is almost always minor compared to the damage done by a thoughtless response. Always. Practice the 5-second rule. When something triggers you, count to 5 before you do anything. Not 10, not 30, just 5. That brief pause is enough to move you from reaction to response, from instinct to intention, from weakness to power. The person who never reacts immediately is the person who never regrets what they said. We are in the final stretch now. 3 mind games remain, and these are the 3 that take everything we have covered and elevate it to a level that most people will never reach. Mind game number 8. Make them wonder what you were thinking. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." There is extraordinary power in being unreadable, not cold, not blank, but composed in a way that does not give others easy access to your internal state. Most people are open books. Their emotions play across their faces in real time. Their thoughts escape through their body language. Their reactions are immediate and transparent. And because they are so readable, they are predictable. And predictability is the opposite of power. The Stoics cultivated an inner stillness that made them extremely difficult to read. Marcus Aurelius could sit in a room full of hostile senators and reveal nothing, not because he felt nothing, but because he chose what to reveal and what to withhold. When people cannot read you, they become cautious. They stop assuming they know your next move. They begin to operate with more care, more respect, more attention. Because the unknown commands respect in a way that the obvious never can. This does not mean becoming a robot. It means becoming deliberate, choosing which emotions to display and which to process privately, choosing when to smile and when to remain neutral, choosing when to respond and when to let the silence communicate for you. Mystery is not deception. It is dignity, and dignity is the foundation of lasting influence. Being unreadable protects you. But the next mind game is about something even rarer. It is about becoming indispensable to the people around you, not by telling them what they want to hear, but by having the courage to tell them what they need. Mind game number 9. Give them what they need, not what they want. Epictetus said, "He who laughs at himself never runs out of things to laugh at." And the person who reacts with truth, even uncomfortable truth, changes the lives of everyone around them. Most people try to influence others by giving them what they want to hear. Flattery, agreement, validation. And in the short term, it works. People enjoy hearing what confirms their existing beliefs. But the Stoics played a deeper game. They understood that the person who tells you what you need to hear, even when it is uncomfortable, earns a form of respect that flattery can never create. When you have the courage to deliver truth with compassion, you become indispensable. Because truth tellers are rare, the world is full of people who will agree with you. The world has very few who will challenge you out of genuine care for your growth. Seneca advised Emperor Nero. He did not flatter the most powerful man in the world. He told him uncomfortable truths about governance, about virtue, about the consequences of unchecked power. And for years, that honesty made him the most influential advisor in the empire. The person who gives you what you need instead of what you want is the person you trust at the deepest level, even if their words sting in the moment, because you know that their loyalty is to your well-being, not to your comfort. Be that person for the people in your life, not a flatterer, not a yes man, a truth teller, and watch how the depth of your influence transforms into something that flattery could never build. And now the final mind game, the one that makes all 9 others possible, the one that is not a game at all. Mind game number 10. Master yourself and you master everything. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Every psychological advantage we have discussed, the silence, the composure, the emotional independence, the strategic patience, they all depend on one thing: self-mastery. The person who controls their own mind controls every interaction they enter, not because they manipulate others, but because they are immune to being manipulated themselves. They cannot be provoked because they have mastered their reactions. They cannot be flattered into foolishness because they have mastered their ego. They cannot be intimidated because they have mastered their fear. Marcus Aurelius sat on the throne of the most powerful empire in history and spent his private hours writing about the importance of controlling his own thoughts, not the thoughts of his subjects, not the strategies of his enemies, his own thoughts, because he understood that everything external flows from what happens within. This is the deepest mind game of all. It is the game you play with yourself. Every morning when you choose discipline over comfort. Every evening when you reflect honestly on where you fell short. Every moment when you catch a reactive impulse and choose a considered response instead. Master yourself, and you will find that mastering your interactions with others becomes almost effortless. Because the person who is fully in control of themselves radiates a power that everyone around them can feel, but very few can name. If you have stayed through all 10 mind games, you are holding something right now that most people will never possess. Not because it is secret, but because most people do not have the patience, the courage, or the honesty to sit in silence long enough to learn it. Let me close with one thought. These 10 mind games are not tactics you deploy on Mondays and forget by Friday. They are a way of being, a way of moving through the world that compounds over time until the person you were before this video becomes unrecognizable to the person you are becoming. Seneca said, "We do not receive a short life. We make it short." Stop making yours short by giving your power to people who never earned it. That is not just philosophy. That is a weapon, a shield, a fortress, and it belongs to you now. If this video sharpened something inside you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you have not already. Share this with someone who keeps getting outplayed by people half as capable. And come back for the next one. Because what we cover next takes these mind games and turns them into something even the Stoics would marvel at. The mind games are not something you play on others. They are something you master within yourself. And from that mastery, everything else follows. Everything.